Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. With Valentine's Day sneaking up on us, I thought it might be fun to create a mixed media Valentine's Day card. I wanted to create some card that had some texture, so I decided to use some of my texture paste. Now before I began, I went ahead and I primed my heavy cardstock with some white gesso. I knew I was going to be using several mediums, so I wanted to make sure that my paper was nice and primed. Now for this video, I'm also going to be trying a new technique. So I wanted to make sure when I added my gesso that it wasn't very smooth. I wanted it to have some texture, so I did leave some thickness when applying the gesso. You can see some of those lines after it's dried. So once my gesso was completely dried, I added some acrylic paint. Now the acrylic paint that I'm using is from Prima Art's the Finnabair collection, and it's the Art Alchemy. This is a metallic based acrylic paint, and I really love the shine that you get when using it. The paint comes in several colors, but the colors that I'm using today are the Opal Magic Violet Green, and then I'm also going to be adding some of the Vintage Rose. Now in between each layer, I am drying the paint. When I added the gesso, I did use my heating tool to dry it, and then also in between each layer of paint, I brought out my heating tool as well. Now you'll notice that I don't really have any rhyme or reason when I'm adding the paint. I'm just looking to cover the cardstock. As I indicated, I am going to try a new technique, and I'm not really sure how it's going to turn out, but we're going to give it a try. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding some glue, and then I'm going to dry it, and then I'm going to take my sander and I'm going to sand it off. I'm hoping that I'll be able to see some of the color on the bottom, but I also want to see if I can create some texture with this glue. Now this isn't anything that I've seen before. I just had the idea to add some glue, let it dry, which is obviously going to create some texture. But then I thought perhaps maybe when I use my sander, it would bring out some of the colors on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and give it a try. Now, when you are using glue with your tools, you want to make sure that you do clean off your brushes right away. Again, this is glue, so it's going to get really hard really quick. So I typically will have a cup of water next to me, or even a wet wipe, so I can clean it off pretty quickly without having to disrupt my process of creating. Now before sanding the glue, I also had the idea to add some white acrylic paint. Not for any reason, again, I'm just experimenting here, so I thought I would experiment with you just to see how it turns out. A lot of times when I am creating, I like to try different things. I don't always do this on camera, but I thought for this video I would kind of show you my creative process. We have so many products out there. We have glues, we have paints, we have crayons, and it's important to try these different tools with different techniques. Now, not everyone is going to always turn out, of course, but it's important to play with our toys and our tools to see what kind of results we can get. All right, so once the white acrylic paint was dry, I did pull out my mini sander. Now this mini sander isn't anything you can purchase in a craft shop. This came in a little package from where I get my pedicures done. So anytime I get little tools, I always try to keep them because it might be something that I could use in my crafting. And this little hand sander was perfect for that. So as you can see, I just simply took that sanding block and I just sanded away some of the dry glue. And it created enough texture so when I brought out my Distress Oxide ink, I was able to rub it on my background and create sort of a grunge look. Now it didn't really do what I expected it to do. I thought when I sanded off the dry glue strips that some of that color underneath would come through, but as you see it didn't. But I still like the results that I got. So keep that in mind. Whenever you are playing, you may not get the exact result that you're looking for, but it still could be a nice find and a nice result. So don't forget to try out that product and experiment. You might be happy with what you find. All right, so sticking with the Valentine theme, I did want to add some hearts. So I found some red scrap paper and I simply cut out 2 hearts. And then I'm going to adhere them down onto my background using some of my vintage collage medium from my Ranger Tim Holtz collection. So once I have my hearts in place, I went ahead and brought out my heating tool once again, and I dried those two pieces onto my cardstock. And then I brought out a stencil so I can add some of that texture paste to create some texture on my background. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn on some music and let you watch my creative process, and then I'll be back at the end of the video to finish off the card. Now the sentiment that I'm using for this card is from I Break for Stamps, and the stamp is called Love is Forever. I knew I wanted to stamp my sentiment directly onto my card, so I made sure when I was adding my texture paste that I used a post-it note to cover up a section to make sure that part of my card was still flat. With texture paste, it makes it really difficult to stamp on, so I wanted to make sure I had a flat surface. Now I am using my MISTI tool, so that way I can make sure I get a nice deep impression. I wasn't sure exactly how well it would stamp onto the card, having some gesso and then also some acrylic paint. So with the MISTI, I knew I could stamp it a couple of times to get a nice crisp image. Now after I stamped my sentiment, I did bring out my heating tool because I wanted to make sure that when I'm adding some final touches, I don't smear my sentiment. For my final touches, I am going to be adding some remnant rubs from Canvas Corp brand. These are little postal marks that I thought would be nice final touches to the card. So at this point, I am just about finished with the card. Hopefully you've enjoyed my process, and I've given you some ideas for creating some mixed media Valentine's Day cards. If you've enjoyed the video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. As always, I will leave a list of all the products that I've used to create this card, along with the links to the stores. If you've enjoyed the video, I would sure appreciate you sharing it with your friends, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about this process. All right, everybody, I hope you all have a great Valentine's Day, and hopefully I'll be back to share a few more cards before we actually get to February 14th. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.